IICRC Standard Summit. I'm James Toll, the current IICRC Chairman and President and Chairman of the Board. My apologies. On behalf of the IICRC Board of Directors, I thank each and every one of you for your dedication and hard work towards drafting and revising the most credible American national standards. I'd like to especially thank and congratulate the following consensus bodies who have completed and published their standards recently. The IICRC S300, one of my favorites, of course, Standards for Professional Cleaning of Upholstery. NC 410, S410, Standard for Professional Cleaning of the Built Environment for Infection Prevention and Control. And the S900, the Standard for Professional Cleaning of Precursors, Drug Residues, and Associated Chemical Waste. Let's take a look at the members for these standards and the harmonized glossary. And now to kick us off, please welcome Standards Director Millie Washington.
Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome. And thank you, James. My name is Millie Washington, and as James said, I'm Standards Director here at IICRC. I would like to introduce my co-speakers for today's general session. As you can see, updates on IICRC policy, and then we'll talk about Robert's Rules of Order. My co-speakers are David Oakes and Darren Foote. Darren Foote is the founder and president of Remediation Training and Consulting and LearnToRestore.com, which provides IICRC certification, continuing education, and other courses to the restoration and insurance industries, as well as to facility managers and risk managers. He also provides consulting, file review, and expert witness services. They do auditing for S500 industry standard compliance and contractor support. With over 30 years in the industry, Darren has personally completed thousands of water, fire, and mold mitigation, as well as reconstruction projects. Darren is an approved IICRC instructor and a certified triple master, as well as holds the RIA Water Law Specialist and Certified Restorer designations. He is currently serving as IICRC Standards Vice Chair, Chair of the Harmonized Glossary Committee, and as Chair of the WRT Technical Advisory Committee. David Oakes started in the cleaning and restoration business in 1973 with 43 years of experience as owner and operator. He has held a general contractor's license and ASCS certification from NACA. David's current certifications include a triple master from the IICRC and certified restorer from RIA. An IICRC approved instructor, David teaches CCT, WRT, AST, OCT, FSRT, and TCST certification classes. David has provided expert witness testimony in both state and federal court. He is currently serving as IICRC Standards Vice Chair and was chairman of as well as chairman of the S540 Standard 2023 Revision Committee. And now, without any further delay, please help me welcome David Oakes and Darren Foote.
And for us to have Millie, who has such an incredible passion for standards, make sure it's done right, has such a passion for our standards in the IICRC, such a passion for helping people. Her and her team are just amazing. So thank you so much. We're so blessed, so grateful to have her. So great asset. The other thing that's just amazing sitting here is there's a lot of groups that call on volunteers. If you've ever had friends, you ask them to volunteer to help you move. You know how that goes when you get there to the next apartment, you got a broken dresser and whatever. Our volunteers that make this happen, I mean, the standards that are being written impact the world. They are globally recognized, and to see not just how many people have come here to this venue, but how many people take so much time every week to develop this, it's just amazing. It's just, as a leadership team, we talk about just the people, the group, anyhow, just we're amazed. Thank you so much for who you are. It's truly appreciated. So. Anybody who's presented knows the rule that says you don't put a whole lot of stuff on the slide. We will be blowing past that rule for the next few minutes. We tried to figure out how to break this down a little bit, but we didn't know a good way to do it. So a lot of this, as Millie indicated, is not going to have a huge, if any, impact on your day-to-day thing in standards, but there were some changes in the policy we did want to iterate. We're out there. The board of directors is the entity responsible for, it's always been responsible for the standards. Now it simply says authorizing standards and oversight of the administration. And so that role, and a lot of people come to the IICRC and say, we think that a standard should be developed for this. And it's looked at and determined, is that, kind of on our railway, is that where we need to be? And sometimes we bring them in, and sometimes we say, that seems like a good idea, but it's just not what we do as the IICRC. And so the board of directors has the oversight on getting them through the process all the way through publication. The Secretariat is the group that does that, and that's obviously the board of directors would handle the Secretariat in doing that. As it says in the green is the changes, obviously. The IICRC board of directors shall assign or delegate the responsibilities of the Secretariat to the standards chair, the standards leadership team, the IICRC standards director, and other consultants engaged by the IICRC. So again, that's just who's in charge of the process to move this all forward and get it where it needs to go. I'm just going to, before I click it, I'm going to look over so Millie can either add, make sense what I said, or fix it. And that's kind of how it goes. So, the standards committee is the standards chair and vice chairs of all of our groups. Sorry, let me back up a bit. So the standards chair and the vice chairs of the leadership team and the vice chairs of each of the chair and vice chair of each of the bodies that comes together. Very important group, meets occasionally, regularly, I guess is a better way to say that, going through. The standards leadership team is the standards chair, the vice chairs, and the standards director. We also meet on a regular basis to discuss moving things forward and planning and adjusting and correcting and just kind of keep everything flowing along and working with each of you as we go forward.
I just want to point out,
Please.
too, there is so much going on with that leadership team, incredible amount of leadership on that, and of course, Millie's a very active part of that. So that's, it seems like a little spot that you hit there, but I don't think this group realizes the activity that goes on in making that a cohesive team in those consensus bodies.
There's a lot of work that happens in our meetings. There's a lot of work that happens outside of our meetings, constantly to make things move forward. So, this one is a change where we used to have the standard and reference guide, and we don't have reference guides anymore as part of the standard. My own understanding of that, I guess, is it was just so easy to say, well, it says here in the S500. Well, that's not actually the S500. It's in the reference guide. Yeah, but it's in the same book. It's got the same cover on it. And so to really clarify that the standard is what the standard is, and it's great to have auxiliary information, ancillary information. And this is a consensus body can do what a consensus body is going to do, and they get together and they have consensus in what's important, what they need to do. Our kind of urging, I guess, as a leadership team is to not create a reference guide and call it an appendix. And it's really easy to be guilty of doing that. So the appendices are important. There's times you simply have to say, in order to understand this, but not part of the guide, we do need to clarify this outside of the guide, not the guide, the standard, and leave it in there. But it's easy to go into teaching mode and putting in too much information. And the standard is the standard. And so just please be cautious about that we don't create another reference guide and just give it another name. That's not the intent of taking the reference guide out of the standard. So, all right. This is, I'm going to kind of explain this, see if Millie can help. So what it says here, and you can see this in green, this is new language. At no time shall a subcommittee comprise of a CB membership that constitutes what's referred to as a rolling quorum, which is defined as greater than 1/3 of the CB membership. This is not something we anticipate. It's not something that's a real problem right now. We don't anticipate it will, but we just want to make sure it doesn't. And what it comes down to is when we've got, for example, subcommittees. We don't want to have a subcommittee that's more than, that could be able to, some people have a way with words and other people not have way. Sorry, I'm kind of stumbling a little bit that would be able to make decisions in that subcommittee and have enough votes to simply come into the CB and say, well, we've pretty much already done this. And then no one has a chance, so that the decision would be made without the input of the entire CB, and when it comes in, the votes are already there to do it. So it's fine to have people listening in on subcommittees. The subcommittee should not be more than 1/3 of the committee, not just, again, to put them in a vacuum. And if we're concerned about that, and you want to have more people on the subcommittee, that's a great time to bring in from your volunteer and SME list, because they're not voting. Therefore, that wouldn't constitute a rolling quorum, but they could be utilized for the experience and desire they have to be involved in the process.
Can we clarify the subcommittees a little bit more in their role here that might help this group? And those are the committees that are not meeting during a regularly scheduled time to do some research or to develop wording, if you will. So that those subcommittees, if they're run well and they work well, actually save a lot of time during the regular CB meetings, and that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because it is so important. Obviously, if we're trying to craft every word in a consensus body meeting, we're never going to get anywhere. So that's what we've done, is I'm sure many of you are doing that and say, hey, we've got to focus on this. Who wants to head that up? And you're meeting another day of the week and having phone calls and coming back and saying, here's where we're going. How does the committee feel about that? No? Okay, we'll change gears. Or yes? Okay, we'll keep going. But it's a way to get the work done in the background, and then the idea is to bring it to the full committee to say, this is kind of, as we've talked about this is where we're going, and how does that make sense to everybody else? And it still is at the direction of the consensus body, not being directed by that group. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So, the Secretariat of Standards leadership team may create or disband subcommittees during as a business of the Secretariat. So the subcommittees are put together by the consensus body. You want to comment on that at all, Ellie?
Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to the subcommittees, the formation, the disbandment of the subcommittees, the no need to have balance on the subcommittees. So it's a really kind of an informal setting. As most of you know, subcommittees are formed by a consensus body to work on your sections, for example, or to work on a particular topic. And so you have that flexibility and freedom to create a subcommittee. In some cases, a subcommittee may be in charge of a very specific project with a timeline that crosses over multiple committees. We have joint subcommittees that work to harmonize between multiple committees. And so there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what they can do, how long they should be active, but what is clear is that they are at best a subset of the parent committee consensus body, and that hopefully for their duration is for a shorter period of time.
And again, this is not a corrective measure. This is not, this is a problem, how do we fix it? This is just kind of looking in the future and saying we want to make sure that doesn't become a concern. Some things could happen, so. All right. Balance, lack of dominance. At times, the interest category. Okay, let me jump back. Consensus body members will initially self-select one of the interest categories. Reviewed by the consensus body chairman and standards chair. So whether we're a producer, a user, or general interest. And what this says, what was added is, at times, the interest category self-selected by an applicant may need to be changed by the CB chair, vice chair, or standards leadership team. And what happens there is a couple of things. One is it's very easy, and I'm getting ahead of myself on a slide or two here, but sometimes those just don't seem really clear. Where someone says, well, I want to join the S100 for text on carpet cleaning, and am I a producer or a user? Well, I use the document to know how to clean carpet or what I should be doing, so I must be a user. Well, no, that would be actually a producer. And so there's times when the consensus leadership, the standards leadership team goes through and says, well, they've put a producer, but looking at their resume, they're actually a user or vice versa. So sometimes we'll do that. Certainly there's times where someone would cross over and do, and qualify as two of those, when you can look and say, well, we're trying to maintain the balance here, and so we're going to move them over here because they still qualify as that. So, all right. This is kind of what I was talking about. The slide I was looking forward to. So a producer is a person or organization producing, manufacturing, supplying the services, not goods, but the services covered by the subject matter of the standard. For example, a water damage restoration contractor utilizing the S500 or a carpet cleaning company using the S100 standard. So a producer is the person who produces that service that's being described or discussed under the standard. A user is someone who, in essence, uses their services to receive those services. So a person or organization using the services covered by the subject matter of the standard rather than producing or selling them. Where appropriate, additional other user subcategories should be considered, including but not limited to the following: user consumer, user commercial, user industrial, user institutional, user government, user labor, such as a homeowner having their carpets cleaned, referencing the S100. And we see more and more of that today, where people are aware of the standards and they're getting mold remediation or carpet cleaning and going, hey, I looked up online and you're supposed to vacuum my carpets before you clean them, or whatever the standard is there. So. And then general interest, a person or organization directly and materially affected and otherwise interested in the services of the subject matter of the standards, such as equipment or chemical manufacturers, academic or attorney. General interest covers any business or interest not covered by the other two interest categories. So, and again, it's critical to be meeting the ANSI guidelines that we have that balance of these interest categories in the standard.
I just want to add, there's often a question, how is a consensus body formed? What is the process? Who is doing this? Because maybe there is some perception that, that there's some impropriety, shady business going on. I don't know. So I just wanted to just point out about the assigned interest category versus the self-assigned, and then we assign interest categories. As Darren mentioned, there's confusion, and half the time the applications are not accurately selecting their interest category. So that's one of the things that we do, is go through each application, review the actual work that they do as indicated by the application, and determine if the self-assigned category is accurate or if we need to make an adjustment. We don't unilaterally make that adjustment. That then is shared with the consensus body, and there is always an opportunity for a member to say, I don't agree, that's not my interest category, right? So there's a dialogue available always to make sure that we are getting it right. And then some of the things that we consider when trying to put together a consensus body is, and we do this as the standards leadership team along with the new chair and vice chair for said consensus body. Some of the things that we consider is balance. That's very important that we have balance on all of our consensus bodies. So if we have 80% applications from producers, we cannot take all the producers. That's not going to work for balance, right? We're looking for users, we're looking for general interests. In some cases, we don't get the right combination for balance, and we have to do targeted outreach, which means we're specifically looking for members from a particular interest category, and so we do that, with a press release and social media and LinkedIn and all of that. So that's only one aspect of it. There's a combination of some experience writing standards is a benefit, right? And we also want to have some new people coming in, because that makes this whole thing more robust, right? To get different perspectives, ideas, and a different way to look at a standard that has already been published. So that's something else to consider. The size of the CB is something that we want to consider. We don't want to have a CB that's 50 people big, because that's unmanageable, unwieldy, difficult to get to the finish line, right? Sometimes we're looking for red flags, I'll be honest. Sometimes we're looking for red flags. If there's a red flag, then we'll consider that, and I can't tell you what that is, because you have to see it to recognize a red flag, So there are many different things that go into this selection process. We also have, sometimes folks will apply as non-voting. They're applying to be advisor or reviewer or subject matter expert. So, that limits whether they're going to be on the consensus body or not. Once that review process is completed, then the proposed roster, it's not a final roster, it's a proposed roster, goes to the board for approval. Once that has been done, only then do we notify members whether they made it to the CB as a member or whether they're assigned as a volunteer. The volunteers are what we call our sort of our backup list, of folks, of experts who have the expertise, who can be called upon as needed, as Darren mentioned. You have a subcommittee and your limit is, say, 5 because you have 15. I'm all over the place with this, but indulge me. You're doing good. Keep going. Indulge me. Say your CB size is 15, and we just talked about rolling quorum. So if your CB size is 15, you can have a maximum of 5 of those members on any particular subcommittee, right? So as to avoid a rolling quorum. And we'll take questions in the end, I promise. So as to avoid a rolling quorum. So what do? You want to have more people, more voices, more perspectives on that subcommittee because it's an important topic. You call on your volunteers. Every consensus body has a list of volunteers available to you. So this is my plug to all CB chairs, vice chairs, CB members. Look at that list. It's available. Those are people who have expressed an interest. They are people who have taken the time to fill out an application, and they may have a perspective that is very valuable to your CB and your standard. So all over the place, but back to you.
And so Millie said it twice, I'm going to say this again, and then David said it once, I'm still going to say it again. When you've been meeting for a couple of years as a consensus body, and then you bring in some volunteers, they're going to have a different perspective. It's kind of like when you go to public review, and people, that's one of the most valid things that's going to happen is that public review. You go, we didn't even think about that. We've read this so many times. We're just kind of blind to it. So it's a great way to have people come in and kind of look over what you're doing and go, hey, is that really what you meant? Or how about if you said it this way? So yeah, it's a great resource there. Although I think Millie had this stuff added in green here mostly, so I'd quit asking her, now what's the difference between a user and a producer again? So appreciate her watching out for me. All right. Do we have this one? Okay. The last one I got did. The one. Okay, I just want to make sure. All right. So the other rule is not a lot of words, but don't read what's on the slide. So again, we're forgetting all that pretty much. Representation of CB members. This is a concern that we need to be aware of. And so the first part just says, listing the IICRC standards consensus body, past and present participation in resumes, biographical information, and other professional experience, notices, and documents is both permitted and encouraged. You should be proud of the work you're doing. You should be able to let people know, I did this. As this organization of the IICRC is putting out these standards, I was involved in helping this become what it is. That's an important thing. And it should be part of your professional resume. It takes a lot of time, and you've given so much to the industry. Consensus body members are encouraged to professionally acknowledge their involvement and advocate for the participation of additional volunteers, industry subject matter experts, reviewers, advisory in future IICRC standards and development. And there is a lot of opportunity for that. I know when I talk about the IICRC and the standards in my classes, I say, look, please get involved at some point. If you can't do a consensus body, read the standard when it comes out. Do the public review. Any way you can get involved. There's, once a new standard comes out, that's going to change all the classes associated with that standard. There's going to be exam review groups and a lot of things where people can get involved on more or less, of a level if they can. So make sure they understand that these opportunities will become available later on. However, second paragraph, consensus body members do not officially represent the IICRC and must not portray themselves as official spokespersons for the IICRC or its standards. Members must clearly communicate that their views, interpretations, testimonies, articles, and any oral or written statements regarding IICRC standards represent their personal opinions and are not endorsed or by the IICRC. Consensus body members must not represent themselves as an official authority on IICRC standards. And that's easy to fall into that trap. When you're writing an article and you say, as a member of this consensus body, or you're giving testimony in court, or you're teaching a class, or whatever it is. Well, I was on that standards. I did that. The S500, the S520, the S1, it says this, and this is what they mean by that. And so as it goes on to say, and I'll come back to my comment here, only exact language directly cited from an IICRC standard must be represented as official standard content and must be clearly cited as such to include the standard number, the title, and the publication date. Any interpretations, supplemental information, opinions, or explanations of cited language must be distinctly separated and clearly differentiated from official standard language. So the standard says this. Now, I think what that means, or how I interpret that, or how I apply that in my business is like this. But any reader of the standard has just as much validity in their opinion as a writer of the standard. Once the standard is published, whether you're on the consensus body or not, it does not give us any more authority to say, well, what I say is more important or more valid than what someone else says once the standard's out there. So we've got to be very clear anytime we are quoting the standard, and this is a group that's going to publish. This is a group that's going to testify. This is a group that's going to do a lot of things with the information. Just be very, very cautious in stating that I'm not an official representative of the IICRC. This is my opinion. This is how I interpret or apply it. Or this is what it says simply. That's it. This is what it says, and let them come to their own conclusion.
I would add one thing to that, because as people look at the standards, they tend to take what they like and ignore what they don't like. You can't take one sentence out of a paragraph. You have to use the entire paragraph in the entire meeting. And that's just a general plug for proper use of standards in that. But again, it's really important that we understand it's your interpretation, not your representing the IICRC.
That's a great clarification. I remember once reading on Facebook, and if I'm the one if this is new information, I apologize that you have to hear it here first, but everything on Facebook isn't true. I know, who knew? But and there's so many times that you see people on these groups, great groups that want to help each other. I love how we help each other in the industry. It's a wonderful thing. But people who say, well, the standard says, and why do they say that? Because now it's not my opinion, I'm speaking from authority. That's why we cite the standard, is because now we're speaking from authority. It's not me, it's the standard that's gone through this process, and that's why what I'm about to say has validity. And I remember one thread about use of air filtration devices, and how come those dang insurance people won't pay for them, whatever it was going on. And somebody said, well, what about this, what about that? And I remember reading through it, and it said, direct from the S500. And then it had some language about air filtration devices. And about 30 comments going, wow, I had no idea it said that. That's amazing. I'm going to put that on all my invoices. And as I read through it, I thought, that doesn't sound quite right. So I went back to the standard and pulled it up, and they had taken the first sentence and a half off of the paragraph. And then they'd gone and gotten some information from the reference guide, not part of the standard of care, and plugged it on the bottom. And am I saying they did that intentionally to mislead people? No, I'm not saying that. But my concern is a lot of people might have put that on their invoice to get paid by an insurance company or paid by a client. And then if push came to shove, I'm not an attorney, but that could be insurance fraud if you're misquoting something to get paid. So I'm just saying we need to be very, very careful in that way to only quote specifically the entire portion of it, don't pick and choose. And if we don't, then we say, again, this is how I interpret it, this is how I apply it, this is my understanding of it. But as a consensus body member, we're not any more official than anybody else once it's published.
For anybody who's on your laptop or on your device, this is the slide why we're here today. This is it, so please pay attention. This one and the next one, in all honesty, but this is, this language did not come about in a vacuum. It has been a recurring concern and issue for us at IICRC from within our CB membership and externally as well. And as Darren said, the language can only be cited from a published standard, not from a draft standard, not from a standard that's made available for public review, even though that is publicly available. That's not the published final standard. And so oftentimes we'll see folks citing a standard because they got it for free off the website during public review. But that's not the final version, right? We have come across CB members who have embellished. We have come across volunteers who have done the same thing, embellished their contribution level, their expertise level. And so this language is very intentional. It is intended for us to have something in writing that gives you guidance on what is acceptable and what is not. And so, I just urge everyone to I know it's a lot of text on one slide. We tried to fix it, but here we are anyway. It's 5.5, representation of CB members. This is on the IICRC website, and it will be added to each of your CB reference documents folders today. I wanted us to finish with this session and then to send it out so that you'll get a notification, you click on it, and you'll get the whole document. That's all I had to say, just that this is important. Thank you.
One just quick comment, thought about this too. When you're representing the standard, and if you're in litigation, usually what happens is it's something that's gone on in the past. You're really only bound by the standard that was current at that time, not the newest edition of that standard. So just a little note there on that.
I was going to mention that because it does talk about when it was published, because any of us that do expert testimony stuff, that by the time it gets to the court, the standard I'm using right now most times is 2015, because that's most of the jobs are 2017, 2018 in there. So something else too, I agree 100% with what Millie said about it's easy to embellish, but sometimes it's not embellishment, it's completely accurate. When you say, I was on this consensus body, or I was the vice chair or the chairman of this consensus body, it's not an embellishment, it's accurate. But it doesn't matter because that officially doesn't make any difference because it's not the embellishment, it's the implications or implying that because of this I have more. So again, this one, the one I mentioned before with the rolling quorum, that's something that's not a problem. We don't want it to become a problem. This is something that's a limited problem we want to keep from getting to become a bigger issue. And again, I think people don't do it intentionally. We're just like, well, yeah, that's who I am, that's what I did, and so therefore I'm going to state that. So just be very, very cautious that you do not represent the IICRC, and because you had whatever position it was, anybody can cite the standard, and what that standard says is what the standard says, regardless of who's citing it. So. All right, representation of volunteers. Volunteers are not consensus body members. We used to refer to them as non-voting volunteers or some other things, which was confusing. So a volunteer must accurately represent their level of involvement as non-voting volunteers in the IICRC standards development process. Being listed as a volunteer or SME subject matter expert does not constitute participation, authorship, or any responsibility for the creation or approval of standards. Individuals must refrain from overstating or embellishing their contributions, clearly distinguishing between direct contributions to official content and advisory or supportive roles. As with consensus body members, only exact language cited directly from an official IICRC standard, clearly including the standard number, title, and publication date, can be represented as official standard content, again, by anybody. So I have seen where people have put that they're on, I'm on whatever standards committee when they're a volunteer who's never been involved with any sort of a meeting at all, but they're on the list. So again, just cautious in properly representing who and what we are on that. Right. So volunteers, individuals having an interest in the work of a particular CB may apply for participation as observers or advisory volunteers. The Secretariat or the CB chair may also select experts to assist in the standard development process. Advisory volunteers and experts shall be notified of the activities of the CB if applicable, may attend and participate in meetings if asked to do so by the standard consensus body chair, and may submit comments for consideration but shall have no vote. They are not members of the CB and do not vote. So we have some, again, that want to volunteer, some that just want to watch the process and kind of see what's going on. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit as well. So. I'm going to let you take this one.
Okay.
You have to read the whole thing. Just summarize it.
Oh, I have to read the whole. Okay, here we go. Notification and agenda 6.2. Okay, so what we had in there was very cumbersome. What we have now says at least 30 calendar days notice of scheduled in-person CB meetings shall be given by the chair of the CB. It works a little differently for us because we meet only once a year in person, and plenty of notification is made available for that. The meeting notice shall describe the time and location of the meeting, the purpose of the meeting, and a readily available source of further information. It goes on to now say, an agenda shall be prepared and distributed with the meeting notice no later than 1 week prior to the meeting date for in-person meetings. This was kind of a discussion with the auditor. I was like, we meet every week. We meet every week. We cannot do this. So that's why it's limited to in-person. And then some of the other language, as you can see, right on the first line, it says 7 calendar day notice of web meetings. No, that's not happening, right? It's not practical. And so that's why that was taken out. Obviously, every change that you see here has been agreed upon by the IICRC Board of Directors as well as by ANSI. Very cumbersome, very prescriptive. The rest of the language talks about meeting format. It talks about what the agenda shall include, what all is highly recommended, in that is included. Old business, new business. We don't need that sort of caging in of our agendas. We want some flexibility, and so that's what this allows. It doesn't change anything for your day-to-day work.
It just adjust for the fact that it's not all in-person meetings and the web and the thing. It's just the way we do the business now primarily. So thank you, Millie. I appreciate that. Open meetings. Meetings of the consensus body and all subcommittees shall be open to all members and observers having a direct and material interest upon a request, and if approved or requested by the CB chair or standards chair, observers shall complete and comply with an observer agreement prior to attending any meeting. So if someone wants to observe, they can. It's not an open invitation. They just say, I want to be on every meeting and do that. Again, I'm going to have you kind of comment on this one, Millie, as to the intent and application of this.
Absolutely. We needed to sort of rein it in a little bit so that we don't just have anyone walking off the street and saying, I want to attend your meeting indefinitely, send me all the information, give me access to everything on an indefinite basis. So this gives us a little bit of teeth when we say if approved, right? So you can make a request, and yes, technically the meetings are open. We do need you to submit an observer agreement form, and so this is new. It's a new requirement as per our policy that if someone who is not included in the consensus body wants to attend a meeting, they fill out an observer form. What that does is it makes them agree to our policies, IICRC's non-disclosure, confidentiality. It makes them indicate what their conflicts might be, conflicts of interest. So it's a form that basically gives us a little bit of information about them and conveys to them the limitations of attending a meeting. And that's some of the language that we've already covered today, which is, don't share this information unless it's a published standard. It's not public information, right? Of course, not disclosing it, because when we're drafting a standard, it's a draft document. It's not available for public consumption in any way. And so that's a new requirement. And if you see observers, and we may have some in the room today, who are here to observe a particular CB's meeting, then they have filled out an observer agreement form. It has been reviewed and approved prior to them being able to attend a meeting in person or even on the web. So it's a new requirement, and it just sort of gives us a little more protection, a little security to ensure that we are aware of all the people involved in the process and that they are bound by IICRC's policies, including code of conduct, ethics, things like that.
It puts them under the same rules that we're under. I'm sure you've all seen that too, or I'm, again, on Facebook, wherever someone's saying, oh, no, I know what the S500 is going to say. I got a friend on the committee that's going to say this. I'm like, that's interesting. You know that. We have no idea what it's going to say, but okay, good luck with that. So, minute 6.6, other than those used by the IICRC staff go to assist in preparation of minutes, AI note takers are not permitted to join IICRC standards meetings or to record and provide notes for meetings. So we had an issue where a lot of people were trying to join with their AI note takers. The policy, we couldn't police it, but the policy also says you don't record it even on your own, offline, off Zoom, whatever, AI recording. So please don't do that. You're not supposed to. Leave it at that.
May I add?
Yes.
Big fail. I was supposed to announce, please, no recording of this session today. That was a good reminder. So yeah, please don't record it in any way. We are recording it, and we will make it available after this session. And so anyone who's not here will have access to it. I do also want to say that the AI notes that we use as staff is really just backup. It's not your meeting minutes. What you see is what we put together. The AI notes is if we miss something or we don't know who said something, then we may go look at that. But it's very much used as backup. It's not shared anywhere, and we don't provide it to CB members.
More about AI tomorrow.
Yes.
A lot more.
All right. Just tell me when you're supposed to jump back in, because I don't want to.
Not yet.
All right. Disposition of views and objections. An effort to resolve all expressed objections shall be made. Each objector shall be advised via email of the disposition of the objection and the reasons therefor. CB members shall submit votes and comments using the online workspace ballot. The CB is not required to address votes and comments not submitted via the online workspace. So this is at the end of the standard going forward. This is not the weekly thing that's going on. This is if there is some of the objections from the CB to the standard, and there's a process for that. Just the metric policy, the imperial system of measurement is the preferred unit of measurement in the IICRC standards. So, got our Australian and Canadian contingency back there when we're doing. So, Scott, we all know that the metric system thing you guys just made up anyhow. So. Appeals response. The Secretary shall attempt to informally resolve the complaint of the appellant within 30 calendar days after the receipt of the complaint. The Secretary shall respond in writing to the appellant, specifically addressing each allegation in the complaint to the extent possible. Added, in the response, the Secretary may find the complaint to be non-persuasive. If the complaint is found to be non-persuasive, the Secretary shall provide the appellant 15 calendar days to let the Secretary know if they wish to continue with the appeal. If the appellant does not respond within 15 calendar days of an intent to continue the appeal, the Secretary Secretariat may close the appeal. Any comments on that, or? I don't have
Yeah, so
questions.
this is, I hope none of you have to ever deal with any of this, it's the appeals procedures that we have in our policy document. We have had appeals at IICRC, and so it is relevant, but they are few and far between, because I think over the years, we've just gotten so much better at, the process, at responding to public review comments and addressing objections and concerns that are raised, that we've been able to steer clear of appeals. But that being said, this is important language, because we're trying to make sure that we have some recourse, some flexibility built into it. And what this does, and where did we get this from? We stole it. We stole it. There are 230 other accredited standards developers in the United States, and they all follow ANSI's essential requirements, and we all do it a little bit differently, and we try to learn from each other. So this is from another accredited standards developer. Actually, many of them do this, where an appeal can be found to be non-persuasive. So just because an appeal is submitted doesn't automatically mean that we're going to form an appeals panel and we're going to go through that process of listening to both sides and determining, the validity of the appeal. If it is non-persuasive, then we have this, it's a small little option of going back to the appellant and saying, it's non-persuasive. If you still want to carry on, you have 15 days. If they don't respond, we close the appeal. That's all this does. If they respond and say, oh no, my objection stands, then we have to go ahead with the appeals panel. So this is just sort of that little bit of like, maybe we can get out of it because there's no merit here. So that's really all it is. And I think I can do the next couple of slides.
Yeah, I was just going to comment. I mean, the appeals is part of what gives the standard teeth, in my opinion. The whole process is why the standard is what it is and why it's utilized the way it's utilized for the work that gets done, for if there is a conflict or an issue later on that goes on out there. So it is an important part of it. And either that it doesn't have merit, or it's just an appeal that's based on something outside what the standard is really supposed to do. So.
Going to sit because this is so comfortable. Okay, and so we have a little bit more language regarding appeals. We started off with talking about non-persuasive appeals, and then we added this in, handling an appeals request. Everything here on this slide is new language. It reads, the complete appeals documentation shall be sent to the appeals panel. There's a lot of more information in the policy document. The appeals panel is a group of individuals that will hear both sides, the complaint, and then the Secretariat, which is IICRC, review all of the documentation and then determine if there is merit in the appeal. I must say that if the appellant has standing and there is merit in the appeal and the appeals panel finds in favor of an appellant, that stops the process dead in its tracks. We cannot do anything. We cannot move forward with the standard. We cannot publish the standard. And so, as Darren said, this is really important. Fortunately, it doesn't happen often. But it's really important because this can stop your standard from being published if there is a disagreement. And the appeals mechanism is important to the ANSI process because this is part of due process. If someone has an objection and the CB has not addressed that objection satisfactorily, they have the option to appeal. And so that's why we're very careful when we respond to objections, to concerns, to public review comments. We try to keep an open mind and see if we need to make an adjustment or a correction in the standard. Carrying on, I didn't even get past the first sentence. The complete appeals documentation shall be sent to the appeals panel to allow the panel to decide if a hearing is warranted or unwarranted for the reasons referenced in 19.4, which is also new language about inappropriate appeals. In the past, if there was an appeal, we put together an appeals panel and we had to go through that process. Now, there is a, well, maybe, maybe not. And the appeals panel now has two options. The appeal may be dismissed without a hearing if the appeals panel deems the appeal is an inappropriate appeal, or an appeals hearing may be granted. An inappropriate appeal is defined as purported procedural issue appeal that is based on issues of a technical nature or material not under consideration by the ballot or public review, or when the complainant does not have standing. So, stolen language, I'll be the first to admit, stolen with permission, so maybe not stolen. But you know, other SDOs do this, where it's not appropriate. It's not an appropriate appeal, and we will dismiss it. Now, what happens if that happens? And this is going beyond the scope of today's discussion, but an appellant always has the option to go to ANSI. So if IICRC dismisses an appeal, the appellant still has the option to go to ANSI and continue with the appeal, and it does happen. Within ANSI, there are a couple of different levels of appeals, and if ANSI also finds in favor of the appellant, that standard is done. If ANSI finds in favor of IICRC, then we can move forward with the publication of the standard. Okay, and then this is just a new section that we added, which was requested or required, I should say, by the ANSI auditor, withdrawal of a standards project. So we currently have a section in a policy document that is about discontinuance of a standards project, which is distinct from withdrawal of a standards project. Discontinuance is when IICRC decides to stop a project before it becomes an American national standard. Before it's finished and published, IICRC says we're not doing that. That's discontinuance. A withdrawal, on the other hand, is withdrawing the development of an already published American national standard. So that's the distinction. If the Secretariat, IICRC, wishes to withdraw its approval of one or more of its American national standards, it may do so without a vote of the relevant CB. This is not language we came up with. This is required by ANSI. This is the ANSI withdrawal language. If the Secretariat does withdraw one or more of its American national standards, then IICRC shall notify ANSI immediately, and the standard shall be withdrawn as an American national standard and announced in Standards Action, which is their weekly publication. So we just had to have that in there. And I think that brings us to the end of this part. We have a little more that we'd like to cover with you. If you don't mind, we'd like to, in the interest of time, hold Q&A. We'll do that in the end. I promise we'll have some time for that. And then with that, I'm going to hand it to David to cover Robert's Rules of Order.
The good news is this is pretty short. And we'll get on to the real business here, because I know you're probably bored of hearing all this stuff that's going on in the background. But you do need to understand why this is legitimate, how important it is to this organization. So we do follow Robert's Rules of Order, and we're not going to follow it. I mean, if you read the whole Robert's Rules of Order, it's very strict and very formal, but there are some things that we have to understand that require the use of Robert's Rules of Order. It is a framework by what we operate our meetings on our consensus body. And the good thing about the Robert's Rules of Order is it's a formalized way of making sure that all voices are heard. And in my observation of what's going on in the consensus bodies is there is a real concerted effort among those consensus bodies to make sure that every voice is heard and every opinion is addressed. And that's the beauty of the consensus body process. And I know Darren alluded to that, hey, we're doing something and somebody brought this up. We never even thought about that. And that's the beauty of it. And then, of course, once you get all the way through that and you go to publish and you get into public review, that's the final set of eyes of people who haven't gone through that history of it. And I'll just step back on something that Darren said that was very important. I don't think it was picked up by the group, but when you're bringing volunteers in or new people into the committee, they don't have the background of all that discussion. One of the beauties of Robert's Rules of Order is it allows those people to bring that up to speed, but that's also problematic if you've got a committee where you have somebody who's not been attending frequently and they haven't had that 3 months or 6 months worth of history on the discussion. I see the nods out there. And then you have to go back over and spend 45 minutes bringing them up to speed, where your participation would have eliminated a lot of that. And I know that.
Just to clarify too, and I don't know if I'm saying this right, but we have our policy, and we don't fully, Robert's Rules is more supplemental. If it's not covered in policy, then it goes to Robert's Rules.
Right,
of Order,
right. So let's cut to the chase and make this pretty simple. Where we need Robert's Rules of Order is when we're formalizing the business of the CB. So you've had your discussion, you've come to consensus, a motion is made for an action, a second, and that brings it to the floor. At that point, then you bring it back for discussion. And that's what you have to do. So you formally brings that official piece of business to the floor. And then it's as required by Robert's Rules of Order, then you go out for discussion. And that is where, I disagree with this or I want to change that, and you have that discussion. And there's a mechanism if you get into the deep Roberts on how to force a vote, but we don't have to go there. Really, it's just a matter of hear them out and then let's vote on it. This is absolutely essential when you are writing a standard and adopting standard language. So in general, you're going to be going through each section and approving those sections, and then at the end of that entire body of work, you're going to go back and review that and reapprove it, and then that's going to go out to the board of directors and then to public review, and then if necessary, changes are going to be made to that. So anything that's going to be part of that official document. Now, there are the things that we do. We're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to get a roll call and the minutes from the previous meeting, and you're going to vote to approve or amend the previous minutes. And this is why attendance is very important, because if you don't have a quorum at the meeting, it's tough to get those done. I've been in several meetings where we've had like 3 sets of minutes to approve, and that's okay. We get that all caught up, and then we have to get back to the official part of the business. So you got the minutes, the reports, the unfinished business, new business. That's all technically the way that the meeting is set up. But again, the most important thing is voting on those items that are going to become part of the document. Now, keep the subject in mind, and this is tough to do in a consensus body, because once you bring up something at one point, then that usually gets some other thoughts and some what ifs, and the discussion goes on. But keep focused on that one thing at a time. Recognize every member has a right to participate in that, and keep that debate going. The chair needs to remain neutral. That's a tough thing to do because we all have opinions, but that's okay. The biggest thing here is consensus body. It doesn't mean that's 100% vote. And that's what the chair needs to do to direct that and guide that consensus body. Again, the quorum is necessary for that business, and then we're going to say that silence means consent. The non-voters, obviously, will abide with the majority if we don't hear from them. And the formal part of it is we have to go through that motion process and vote. But very often what we will do in that meeting is, we have the motion, we have the second, we enter that into the minutes, we open that up for discussion. If it's something we've discussed at length, it's generally, hey, I hear no discussion. Anybody opposed to this? That's generally the way that I look at it. I look for the opposition. You can do a formal vote if you need to approve or disapprove for it, whatever. Again, just follow those. That is the main part of the Robert's Rules of Order, is the stuff that's going down in the document. Move it ahead if we can. The debate is in that discussion time. You can add amendments. Sometimes that whole amendment process requires a second vote. Sometimes it's easier to withdraw the motion and the second and start all over again. But I think that's up to the chair and the committee on how you function with that, because sometimes you get deep in the weeds when you get into amendments on that. So we call for the question on that. Now, there's some things we're going to suggest here for working through the meetings that may be helpful, that we have found that moves these meetings along. You can use Zoom to get polls, and there's only that you'll have to get co-host ability to get that those Zoom polls up. and staff can help you with that. So generally, the chairman and vice chair of the committee don't have that hosting capabilities, but it's easy for staff to do that. They can just give you that hosting capabilities. Another one that works really good is just kind of a round robin. No motions needed to get opinions. You're getting the pulse. What is the direction? Where are we trying to head with this? Are we in consensus with this? Is this an important item that we need to discuss? And there's a number of ways to do that. One of the ways that we do this is we go around and we ask each person that's on that committee, your comments, your suggestions. I haven't heard from you. I'm very bad, I'll be honest with you. I'm a very right-handed person, so I tend to start very meticulously and go from the top left to right, and that's not good. You need to sometimes start from the bottom and work backwards, because very often you'll get people in your committee that will say, yeah, they've already said it, I don't need to make a comment. Well, you're not getting their first opinion on that, and I'm sure they do agree with what's already been spoken, but their voice is not heard, and it's important to bring them into that. Very, very important. I think you're all familiar with Lee Center. Lee, I don't know how he does this. I wished I could mimic this. He could pick the person on the CB that wasn't paying attention over Zoom and nail you with that and say, what's your opinion, Dave? Oh, I was off in space on that one, forgot about it. And I don't know how he was able to pick that up, but if any of you that are running a meeting could figure that out and get that person and bring them back in and get them engaged in that conversation. It was just a fascinating gift that he had. We can summarize those as chairman and vice chairs and put our voice in there. Straw polls are really a good way just to kind of say, hey, raise your hand if you agree or raise your hand if you disagree, and let's see where we are. Hey, if half are agreeing and half are disagreeing, hey, we're not ready for a motion here. We need to go back and have some more discussion. With all of this, what we're trying to do is help you make the best use of your time during the meetings and move that meeting along. If you can get the hard work done, and when I say the hard work done on a committee, is the thought process about the changes and additions you need to your standard, and documented research on that, not just it's my opinion. Where did your opinion come from, and what can we document that and use that to come to a good document in that standard. And that, I have been on many meetings where we've sat down and spent an hour on one sentence, and half of that time we were looking at research, trying to come up with numbers and perspectives on that. So if the chair and vice chair can encourage their committees to work between the meetings, the homework, so to speak, and there's a formal process that Millie and Brandon have set up where you can actually memorialize that and follow a structured process. But even if you don't go through that structured process, if you would just get your committee members to think about and maybe make notes on their own of the comments and concerns that they have before you start going line by line. Because if you're going line by line on a new standard or a revision, it is going to take you years to get that done. And we want to be efficient and respect the amount of volunteer time that we have in this room, because everybody's time is extremely valuable. So with that, we're going to open this up to questions and answers.
I make a motion, we go to Q&A.
I second the motion.
Discussion?
Is there any discussion? We're now opening this up for discussion. That's right. We're discussion. Now, what was it? I was supposed to say something there.
And actually, I'm sorry to take a step back, but the last little bit about participation from your consensus body members. I hate to say this, but this morning I was speaking with one of you who said to me, I'm just filling a seat. I'm not really, yeah. So we don't want that. We don't want that. Everyone on a consensus body has a vote. That's a powerful mechanism. Please use it. And as chairs and vice chairs, please make sure that everyone on your CB feels like they are welcome. We're a group of diverse people. I'm sure there are introverts, extroverts on every committee. We want to make sure that we draw out the quieter people or someone you haven't heard from in a while. And so all of those tools they're helpful. Whether it's just a simple raise your hand on Zoom, and if you're driving, tell me that your hand is raised, or whatever, There are ways to draw out participation. And so this is simply to urge all leadership to please keep that in mind moving forward. Thank you.
And David said that I know on the S500 they're so good at that, where they'll go through and say, okay, we're going to start at the top. What are your comments? Going to start at the bottom next time, and make them speak, but give them a chance to at least say something, and not just it's so critical. So yeah, thank you.
You have more than a vote. You have a voice, and I've learned on the CBs that I've been involved with, very often you're going to have somebody that's very quiet. But when they speak, you better listen, because they probably have some very profound things to say. They're not just there spouting off to get attention. They have carefully thought out what they have, and those are the gems on our committee.
Millie, I have a question since I came kind of close to this. In section 19.4 of the new guidelines and rules, how do you define an appellant's standing?
Oh, John has the toughest questions. He's going to make me dig deep for this one. So it's going to depend on the standard. It's going to depend on the particular scenario. So if we have, for example, is a limited public review, 5 pages of a standard that are out for public review. At that time, for that public review, only those 5 pages are available for commenting. Okay? So if an appellant says, I have an issue with section 15.3, section 15.3 was not part of that public review, so you have no standing to submit an appeal. That's one example. Another could be, you're not impacted by the standard in any way. So in other words, a materially interested party or a stakeholder, they have to, the onus is on them to prove that they're going to be impacted negatively by something in the standard. A lot of gray area there. It's just, and a lot of legalese. So, but I hope that helped.
So for the purposes of running our meetings with the observers, it's pretty typical for folks to come in and out. Do they have to sign a document if they want to come in and sit on a meeting?
They have to, yes. So in other words, if you want to invite someone to a meeting and they have never attended a 5:30 meeting, we will have them fill out an observer agreement form and submit that. It gets reviewed, it gets approved. Now, if the same person comes back 3 months later and says, I'd like to attend again, then if you as chair approve that, they can attend again. That's all.
I'm speaking for like today and tomorrow.
Today
I
and
wasn't
tomorrow,
sure.
yes, we are requesting observer agreement forms to be filled out.
So if you're not part of the CB,
Yes.
regardless, okay.
Yes, absolutely. And we do have, I want to say, half a dozen people here at the summit who are observers who have filled out those forms. And if that impacts your CB, you should know about it. Like, I would have let you know, or Cheryl would have let you know. But we can connect after this. Yeah.
Just keep in mind, too, as chairman, it's your responsibility to make sure they have no voice in there, even if they do show up in there, right?
Or no vote.
Or no vote.
No vote. I mean, they can speak if asked to. Absolutely.
I've been a big fan of using the chat function on the Zoom meetings, but I've noticed sort of a quasi-reluctance on some meetings to activate the chat or use the chat. I think it's a great collaborative tool, especially for consensus bodies that have gotten to know each other really well and they can really play off each other. Is there a firm reluctance on the part of the organization not to use chat, or is chat okay, or is it committee specific?
Chat is 100% good. We want to use it. We do use it for all of our CB meetings. There is one exception. There's one exception, and that is a joint task force. And the intent there was to minimize disruption. So that was a very intentional exception. But all other meetings, we have the chat function enabled. And if it's a settings thing, then, that you're aware of or something like that, then we certainly would fix it. But yeah, we want to encourage communication in all forms, because there's so much that we do behind the scenes when the meeting is going on. We'll look up a definition or a term and provide suggestions, right? So the chat feature is absolutely perfect for that, and we encourage everybody using it, minus one group.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Do you have those forms? Is there a process? If somebody wants to sit in on a committee meeting today, do you have those forms to be signed in the meetings themselves?
do.
Or do you have to come and get approved, or how does that work?
We do have some hard copy forms available at the registration desk, but we have already people who have filled those out, and Erica Price has them. She's back there, but we have them available, yes.
Okay.
Anybody, and you may have someone come to your meeting who has already filled it out, and if that's the case, your chair and vice chair should already be aware of it, because we have communicated that for those who have already filled that out.
Then my second question relates to, does an observer or whatever you want to call these people that aren't actually voting, do they have a right or are encouraged to speak or participate, or are they just there to sit there and listen?
Well, they're observers, but if requested to speak by the chair, they can.
So you have to be requested by the chair to speak. You can't say, I have a comment.
I mean, you could, and if the chair gives you the floor, then you speak. Yeah,
All right.
you could.
That could also be rescinded by the chair, that the chair controls that.
Yeah, and the intent is not to stifle or limit participation. It is just to ensure that our CBs can continue with the work that they're doing with minimal disruption. That's really it. We have to have some sort of guardrails in place. Otherwise, this can become a free-for-all very quickly and easily. Any questions for David or Darren?
Hi, Millie. It was brought up
no,
earlier.
David, Darren.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, hi. Hi, good to see you. Okay. So it was brought up earlier, the process when you have someone new to the committee that hasn't been on a CB before. Is there going to be something that can be used as kind of onboarding to explain the terms and everything before someone were to come into that CB?
Yeah, that's a great comment, something we strive for, but I'm not sure that we succeed all the time. We certainly have the initial meeting of every CB, which is the introductory meeting. We cover policy, we cover all of everything that you're talking about, right? Whether it's the workspace, access to the subscription side, the policy document, how we write standards, the whole process, although an hour and a half is not nearly enough, but we do that. The other thing that we do is we do a completely different session with chairs and vice chairs to give them all of the tools that they need to understand those needs and fulfill them. And then as staff, we're always available. If someone's feeling overwhelmed and you don't understand what's going on or you need a little bit of help, please reach out. Our intent is to make sure that this is absolutely clear and understandable and that the lines of communication are open. And so I just want to put that out there. If you're feeling overwhelmed, we're here to help. It's our singular job. So please reach out. I also want to just piggyback off of that comment and say that we do have new folks. We do have people who've never participated in standards who maybe don't feel comfortable, doing that. And they maybe feel like they'll sit in for one cycle of the standards revision and then be more actively participating in the next one. And I think we can try to dismantle that belief and just be more open and welcoming and encouraging of those that we hear less from. And I think I've already said this, but we see this in the CB meetings, right? And as seasoned standards writers, as chairs and vice chairs, there's a lot you can do to make people feel welcome and that they have a voice and are heard. Now I'm rambling, so I'll stop. Look at that. We have 45 seconds to spare. Yay! And so, please feel free to click on that. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out. Tomorrow, we will be building partly on today's presentation. We will discuss IICRC's new standards AI use policy. Does that sound exciting? I think it'll make for an interesting and informative session and discussion. So please come back. It's new. It's new territory. It's something we're exploring. We're trying to keep up with the changing times, and so we'll be sharing that information, some discussion around what's acceptable, what's not, what the policy itself says, and so please come back.